Welcome to the third day of the 2021 edition of TERI's annual flagship event, the World Sustainable Development Summit, being held under the broad rubric of redefining our common future, safe and secure environment for all. This edition of the WSDS marks 20 years of the platform, and it is a matter of great pride for us at TERI that you could join us for this important milestone. We now begin the session on towards enabling global environment, accelerating women leadership and empowerment. It is my pleasure to invite Dr. Ajay Mathur, Director General TERI, for his welcome remarks.
Thank you very much, Swati. And Ms. Karen Klimowski, Mrs. Vaishali Sinha, Dr. Mukesh Agi, Ms. Shibu David, Ms. Anita George, Dr. Irene Jainer Reichel. Thank you all for joining us, and thanks to all the participants in this extremely interesting seminar. You know, this is at the heart, I believe, of a country's progress. I mean, this is at least how I measure progress. How effective are women, both in the workforce and in decision-making at various levels, whether it be in the household or it be at the national or corporate levels. In this country, for example, we have seen a lot more girls going to schools. We have seen them topping their exams. We have seen them achieve parity in workplaces. Yet we see that their representation in the workforce is not as much as we would like. I was looking at the kind of representation we have on the various panels in this World Sustainable Development Summit, and believe you me, there were some which were only male. This surprises me. Where is it that we are going wrong? There's obviously a problem which is a social problem, but here we are not, I hope at least, not talking of social problems, at least as far as the World Sustainable Development Summit is concerned. We at TERI are very proud of the fact that I think something like 40% of our workforce is women, and something like 28, 29, 30% of our senior leadership is women. Yet we have this problem. We try to sweep it under the carpet, saying, you know, energy is a very different kettle of fish. Women don't come into it. Vaishali is a living example of success in the energy industry. We or Shibu. I mean, I'm looking forward to hear. Were there glass ceilings that you broke? Anita and IFC. And now at CDQI, what is the kinds of policies, both implicit and explicit, that helped you rise to the top? So we are not just discussing the challenges confronting women in leadership positions, including poor access to social capital, insufficient contacts and all that, but also what can we do to attract more people? You are all not only leaders, you are role models. What can we learn from you? How can we go ahead and, you know, at the next World Sustainable Development Summit, I hope that we would have a much larger percentage of women speakers, possibly 50%, as opposed to the abysmal number that we have this year. I am absolutely delighted. I thank all of you for being here with us. And Swati, back to you for the session.
Thank you, sir. I would now like to invite Ms. Karen Klimowski, Acting Deputy Mission Director of Usaid India, for her special address.
Great, thank you so much, and a very good evening and warm welcome to everyone. It is my pleasure and privilege to be with you all today for this plenary session focusing on women's roles in shaping our collective future. Now more than ever, we need to focus our energy towards creating a sustainable world, and women must be at the core of that effort. For this reason, it is so timely that today's dialogue will build on our understanding and explore opportunities to accelerate women's leadership and empowerment. I am delighted to be here at the World Sustainable Development Summit and to be given the privilege to engage in this session, which has such an important theme. I'm also thrilled to join our partners, the Energy Resources Institute and the U.S.-India Strategic Partnership Forum. And I'm looking forward to hearing industry leaders discussing ideas how to accelerate women's leadership and empowerment. India, the world's largest democracy and second most populous country, represents a unique mix of tradition, culture, and innovation. Indian women today are leading across economic spheres. It is an impressive achievement and one that we must further bolster to ensure future growth remains inclusive. At USAID, we believe that investing in gender equality and women's empowerment can help eradicate poverty, build vibrant economies, and unlock human potential on a transformational scale. It is a key to effective and sustainable development outcomes. USAID's strong conviction and commitment to women's empowerment is reflected in our work and partnerships across the world. For many decades, USAID has worked closely with the government of India, donor, philanthropists, and the corporate sector to promote programs that empower women, men, girls, boys, and transgender persons, in addition to addressing social inequalities and providing equitable access to healthcare, water and sanitation, education, microfinance, clean energy, and sustainable livelihoods. Our work strengthens opportunities for women to formally participate at all levels. We strive to integrate women into all sectors and resolve gender concerns, not only to improve prospects for women and girls, but also to further the United States vision for a free and open Indo-Pacific. Gender inclusive development remains essential to reaching our goals. We are proud of the many initiatives USAID has undertaken and the substantial achievements it has reached in our partnership with India. Let me share just a few of those achievements. USAID helped 3,600 women-led marginalized families in the tribal area of Odisha boost their incomes by 40% through training in agricultural and non-timber forest product sales. USAID renovated water, sanitation, and hygiene facilities in 60 schools over the past 2 years, benefiting nearly 18,000 school-aged children, 50% of them girls. USAID also partnered with GE Healthcare and 3M India to train women healthcare workers to become health entrepreneurs and offer new medical technologies to their communities. Our journeys continues with vigor and commitment as USAID focuses on increasing women's participation in the energy sector, traditionally a man stronghold. One such effort in the South Asia Women in Energy, a joint collaboration with USISPF. SAWIE spotlights advocacy for greater gender equality and the mainstreaming of women's leadership, critical prerequisites for growth across sectors in any country. SAWIE is going beyond corporate boardrooms to highlight issues across the energy supply chain, from enhancing capacities of women in the distribution utilities to boosting access to clean energy at the grassroots level, to providing internships and research opportunities to women engineers, to improving health by reducing indoor air pollution, and to alleviating poverty through increased income generation opportunities. The role of women in today's world is crucial, and we are facing urgent decisions on what shape our collective future should take. Strengthening women's participation in the workplace will bolster our progress towards reviving the global economy, reducing our carbon footprint, and addressing priorities for a sustainable future. Today's event is another key SAWIE milestone. SAWIE and TERI are co-hosting today's important plenary session to highlight gender-inclusive sustainable development and promote dialogue towards creating a global enabling environment for women's leadership. Many ideas are sure to emerge from this World Sustainable Development Summit, for the 2021 United Nations Climate Change Conference, COP26. And I'm hopeful that this topic too will stimulate interest. It's thrilling to see leaders and experts from across sectors join forces for our shared commitment to gender equality. The experience each one of you brings helps accelerate women's empowerment and achieve meaningful, sustainable development across South Asia. Once again, I'd like to thank all the dignitaries and delegates who have joined us from India, the far corners of South Asia, the United States, and across the globe. I hope the deliberations that arise during this session will generate fresh insights and help us advance our common objectives regarding women's development. I'd like to extend my heartfelt thanks to Dr. Ajay Mathur and to Dr. Mukesh Aghi for their continued partnership with Usaid. Finally, let me congratulate the team at TERI, SAWIE, and USISPF for their excellent teamwork and organization, as well as to Deloitte, our partner for Greening the Grid Renewable Integration and Sustainable Energy Initiative, which guides SAWIE and provides ongoing support. Welcome once again to what are sure to be rich discussions today. Thank you all very much.
Thank you, ma'am, for your insightful remarks. It is my pleasure to now introduce the chair of our panel, Ms. Vaishali Sinha, the Chief Sustainability Officer, Renew Power Limited, and the co-chair of South Asia Women in Energy. Ms. Vaishali, to you. You're muted.
Try removing the headphones, Vaishali. If you're having the headphones, just try removing them, then connect.
No?
Not
yet. Okay, let's
see. Yes, we can. Yes, we can hear you. We can hear you. Yeah.
Thank God. Oh my
Thanks.
God. Good. Bad timing of that, but such a pleasure to be here. What energy in those opening remarks. Dr. Ajay Mathur and Karen, good evening to all the panelists. It's indeed my pleasure to be here with all of you, though virtually. I wish it was in person, and I really hope we can all meet in person soon and see people, see faces, and hear voices in a room, really. I think we're all missing that. It's an absolute privilege to be chairing this plenary session on Towards an Enabling Global Environment, Accelerating Women Leadership and Empowerment, which is co-hosted by TERI and SAWIE, which is a joint venture initiative of USAID and USISPF as part of the 20th World Sustainable Development Summit. 2020 was a year I think we'd all like to erase from our memory. The global pandemic was unprecedented. It really wreaked havoc in the lives of people, the economies worldwide. We all came to a grinding halt. Thankfully, the new year has been a more positive one with vaccines in news and vaccine drives in news, which is the more important part. And it's good to see that countries are taking lead in doing the right thing. The key now is it's important for us to build back. And not only just build back, but build back green and build back inclusively. And that's where we should all put our efforts. I think there is talk, but we also need to walk the talk, and that is going to be important. And that's where women come into the picture. I think women have been disproportionately impacted by this pandemic, and we just have to ensure that when we build back, they are at the center of the initiative and the effort. As we all know, SDG 5 talks about achieving gender equality in all spheres and ensuring equal access to opportunities for women when it comes to growth and leadership, by 2030, which is a decade of action, we hope that we'll have a different scenario where we will have women dominating this conference, and not only hoping for a 50-50 participation. That's a small part of what we want, but we also want to make sure that the data and the statistics, the way we read, changes significantly. And if I could bring attention of the participants to some of the facts and figures which we read on a day-to-day basis, and honestly, it is extremely disheartening for us leaders, of course, but also for the young women who are there, who have ambitions and hopes. But when they see that, especially if I could take some numbers from India, that women form about 48% of India's population, they only contribute 17% to the GDP. 85% of women are employed in the informal sector, which is not even covered by labor laws or any social security schemes. At the workplace, pay disparity is a major issue. It's not addressed. Many surveys are done, but on an average, women get paid about 20% less than men for the same job they do. Very disheartening for young women, for leaders, and so we really need to do more. If you look at some of the NSE listed companies here in India, only 3.7% of NSE listed companies have a woman MD or a CEO. And a requirement which was introduced recently. Otherwise, it was a single-digit number on boards. So very few women in leadership positions. The situation doesn't get better when it comes to entrepreneurship. Entrepreneurship is an area where at least the energy sector is growing so fast and rapidly, there are going to be huge amounts of opportunities. Women get hurt by a lot of the climate change issues, as we all know. But if you look at the funds available for women to take forward entrepreneurial ideas, I don't think it's a very inviting story there. Women own about 20% of all business enterprises in India, and we're talking about small business enterprises, but a lot of this is on paper. And that's extremely unfair. That's the way things are. And so I think as women, we need to be more assertive, we need to fight back, and a lot needs to be done, whether it is in the corporate sector, whether it is with respect to policy making, whether it is respect to investors, actually, prioritizing inclusiveness as far as funding platforms by women is concerned. If you look at the World Economic Forum, which is the Global Gender Gap Indices, we all probably read it a lot, many times. India languishes at 112th out of 153 countries. So when we look at India, there is a huge amount of opportunity and scope for us to just do much better than what we are doing right now. And honestly, partnerships like this, platforms like this, bring this to the center. When we discuss these things, we put it on the table, it gets into a report, it gets to the government. And when it's an organization, or should I say when it's organizations like these, which we see today, I think there is impact and there is hope. So that is the positive part of what I wanted to say. And when there is hope, there is action. And when there is action, there is impact and outcome as well. So with that, I would like to introduce the panelists today. It's such an exemplary set of folks here, very power-packed. So delighted to see that this distorts the low women participation, the conferences scene. So well done on that. But I agree with Dr. Mathur that, the panels have to have more women, and we face that all the time. So we must change that. There is absolutely no doubt. So I will go introduce the panelists very quickly and briefly. I know we have a time limit here, but we all know actually none of the panelists need any introduction. And if I could start by saying that they really don't need any introduction, but for the benefit of the audiences, we have Dr. Mukesh Aghi, who's the president and CEO of USISPF. He has extensive experience working with businesses and government leaders in the US and India to promote trade and strengthen ties between the two countries. He served as an executive member of board of L&T and has also expanded various businesses at the global level. During his time at Steria, Dr. Aghi served as the chairman and CEO of the Asia Pacific region. And so we are very delighted to have you. You've had a great impact on the trade we've seen blossom between the two countries, and I've participated in some of the events, and it's really a great contributor to the relationship which India and US share. So delighted to have you here. Welcome. We also have Ms. Shibu David, who is the CHRO of GE South Asia and GE Renewable Energy Onshore Wind APAC and China. She has over 20 years of experience and has been working with the GE Group for the larger part of her career. She joined GE in 2005 as the organizational and staffing leader at the GE Commercial Finance team. It's fantastic to have you. You're a perfect example of how we need women to be working in leading companies and making a difference where it needs to happen. We have Miss Anita George, who is the EVP, Deputy Head CDPQ Global. Ms. George fills in a key role in developing CDPQ's activities in 3 priority areas internationally, in the US, Latin America, Europe, and Asia Pacific. She actively participates in positioning CDPQ internationally, as well as developing and executing its global strategy, again, at the heart of a business where impact can be made. And it's wonderful to have you join our session. We have Dr. Irene. She's the president of the Global Forum for Sustainable Energy, vice president of REN21, ex-Austrian ambassador to the People's Republic of China, exemplary profile. We are delighted to have you as a leader who's contributing in the area of sustainable energy in a very significant way. So a big welcome to all the panelists, and I can't wait to get into a conversation with all of you. Very power-packed session. What I propose to do is that in the interest of time, I'm going to open it up for comments by each one of you, and I'll invite you to make comments for about perhaps 3 to 4 minutes, just doing the numbers because we want to leave some time for Q&A. And then if there is time, I'll come back with a round of questions as well. So we'll play it by ear. I'd request all of you to stick to time so that we can have a conversation as well. And I'd like to start. Usually we start with women, but given we have more women, I'd like to start with Dr. Aghi. So I want to come to you, and I want to ask you to make some opening comments. And as you make these comments, Dr. Aghi, may I request you to talk about, you have headed several global corporations. Now you're leading USISPF. It's a great platform. You've had close connects with governments and have an insight into policy making and planning. What are your thoughts on how we can get government to take action and to have policies which keep gender at the heart of policy making? I was at a session yesterday with which was organized by HBS, and there was a very interesting conversation around political and public entrepreneurship. And the essence of that was that women are, statistically it has been proven, far superior in public entrepreneurship and innovation and contribution, but their participation is abysmally low. So we all know that women can do better as CEOs, as MDs, as leaders, but we don't see them as much as we should. What are your thoughts? And with that, over to you, Dr. Aghi.
Thank you, Vaishali. And I would say I know how you feel as a minority, and I feel the same, all the women. But it's an honor and a pleasure to be here with you all. To answer your question, I think you have to look at it from a global perspective as to what is happening. IMF did a global analysis of 189 economies. And out of those 189 economies, 104 economies still have laws which prevents women from working in specific jobs. 104 economies still have laws. So to answer your question, yes, laws do prevent that. And when you look at almost 59 economies did not have laws about sexual harassment at workplace. And almost 18 economies of the 189 economies which were studied, husbands can legally prevent their wives from working. So we're talking about 21st century, and we have laws which goes back to the medieval times itself. When you look at today's workplace, women get almost 23% less wages or salaries, compensation than men. So this is all across the world from a developed and developing economies itself. My concern is when you look at as a digital divide increases, it is not between rich and poor, it's between men and women. Today, almost 3.9 billion women do not have access to internet across the world itself. And that divide is increasing. And if you are not on the digital arena, you cannot progress further. When you look at the Fortune 500 companies, 5% are CEOs. So right there, from the top of the largest companies down to the emerging economies, there is a structured discrimination which takes place against women, from wages to every aspect, from safety, etc. I was looking at, you mentioned about women in India contributing 17% to the GDP, and almost 29% are women in the workforce and contributing 17%. It shows that they're paid much less than men. And on a global basis, women contribute on the average 37% to their respective GDP. So right there, India has a much more steps to move forward in this arena. Also, studies have shown that when you get women in workplaces, in companies, in countries, it increases productivity. Analysis, again done by IMF, shows that if you increase women participation into workplaces in India, it has an impact of almost $700 billion in the short term itself. And we're trying to have India be a $5 trillion economy. What we are seeing is that if you increase women participation by 10%, the GDP increment in India will go up by 27%. So what we have is numbers which state the fact itself. I think the discrimination comes definitely from the culture aspect. It comes from the laws, attitudes, and the easiest place to change that is in a work environment. In my organization, and especially when we look at my previous work organization, we had a rule: for every job you interviewed a man, you also interviewed women. And once you define those criteria in the workplace, you will see a dramatic shift happening because you're giving opportunity on equal basis to both genders, and that shift takes place. In our effort, as Karen mentioned about the SAWIE, and Vaishali, you're involved with that. The biggest gender discrimination is in the energy, infrastructure, and manufacturing sector. And I think if we can work together, especially on the SAWIE platform, we can move forward. So in closing, I just want to say that if we take a structured approach individually in our own organization and a simple rule that for every job opening, we will have a women as an interview candidate equal to men also, you see a dramatic shift taking place. Thank you.
Hi, can you hear me? Just checking. Yeah, great. Okay, I just got a bit of a scare first time around, but fantastic points, Mukesh, you've made. And husbands can legally prevent wives from working. I'm sure our daughters read it, and so they are not very keen to get married because they're so passionate, this young generation, about their careers much more than I think a lot of women were earlier. And these are not great, statistics for them to be reading, but they have to read these. It's unfortunate. I think if we practice a lot of what we say at these events, I think the world's going to be a much better place for women. So it's all about implementation, right? And it's all about implementation. Implementation is good when we have the funds. And so my next question is to Anita. Anita, you have vast experience in finance and, an area which does attract, actually, in all fairness, a lot of women. You work with institutions like IFC and World Bank in the past, and, so exemplary background. I would like to know from you, firstly, how can these institutions do better to help enhance economic empowerment of women, particularly in economies like ours, like in India, as as the rebuilding work begins in a post-COVID world? It's going to be critical. So, what is your view and your thoughts with respect to actually, kind of have, more effective action with respect to affordable financing for women entrepreneurs in emerging markets?
Thank you, Vaishali, and thank you, TERI, USAID, and USISP for inviting me to this great panel. I think it is, since the topic is sustainability, talking about women seems very appropriate and should be front and center, so I'm very happy for that. Let me start by saying that everything that has been said by you, Vaishali, and Dr. Agi really was one of the reasons where early on in my career, I decided the only way that you can make change is to not accept status quo. So I think first and foremost, one has to hit at the structural hurdles that a lot of women face. So being initially in the IFC and World Bank in the infrastructure sector, the standard response that I often got was, we don't have women in these sectors, so we just have to, settle down with men for our teams. And this is something where in all the organizations I've been in, IFC, World Bank, as well as CDPQ, I have said that's not good enough and really pushed hard, pushed headhunters. And when that has failed, have gone out and sought names of women by just reaching out to my network. And I'm very proud to say that in infrastructure in IFC, we had 3 women when we started. By the time I left, the team was 50-50, which was for the infrastructure sector a big move forward. And actually more important than just the numbers is the way in which it transformed the dynamics of the team. We had, in fact, much richer discussions, arguments, the ability to bring forward innovative, creative ideas. And I would say both the men and women realized much more of their intellectual and ability to execute by virtue of having those debates and discussions. Some of the other things that I would say is that why, Dr. Agi, you talked about IMF, and IMF itself, as well as the World Bank, IFC, we all had this mandate that we should have women in our senior echelons. But often we'd find that in the middle part of the hierarchy, you would have fewer women. So we started asking ourselves the question, why do women drop out at a certain age, at a certain level, etc. And the answers are, there's no rocket science. It's very clear that if you give women flexibility, they're very willing to continue staying in the workforce, and their careers are as important to them as they are to men. So what we take today as normal, the work from home, was something which was seen as a luxury or favoritism to women when we implemented it in some of our institutions to say this will give women the flexibility. Also giving men the flexibility to take paternity leave. So having those kind of structural changes also made a lot of important impact to keep women within the workforce. In India, you mentioned 29% of the workforce. India is one of the countries where that participation has actually been falling. So I think we need to ask ourselves the question, why is it falling? It's something that is troubling, and it should be moving in the opposite direction. A third point that I would like to make is legal. So as a financial institution, we are very keen that laws are followed. So when India introduced the requirement of women on boards, we saw a change in terms of women being getting into boards, getting onto boards, and also companies and corporates realizing that they have to proactively do this. And now I'm glad to say that there are some organizations that have been moving forward, but maybe not enough. And we really need to also provide women the opportunity to be able to know what does it take to be a board member. So I'm part of an organization called Talentnomics, which does exactly that. So we actually train women to be able to take on board positions, and we are encouraging companies to take those women onto their boards once they have gone through the training. And often I've been told, why do you think that training is required just for women? And I would say because it really helps women to perform and show that they can deliver what the companies are looking for, and that encourages them to bring on more women onto the board. And we are seeing that once they have one woman, companies are much more open to bringing on more women. And I've heard more and more companies in India say that actually we would like to have many more women on our board, not just what is legally required. A last point I would just say, as you mentioned, entrepreneurship. And I'm very proud to say that CDPQ, which is Canada's second largest pension fund, we have taken a stance of going explicitly to help women entrepreneurs. So we invite 100 women entrepreneurs every year, and we have an ongoing forum where we actually bring in venture capital as well as private equity funds so that they can interact, they can have access, and we have a good rate of success in terms of women getting access to finance. And the last point I'll make is most recently we introduced a diversity and inclusion fund called 25 to the power of 3 of about 250 million Canadian dollars, which is, and to be eligible to take equity from this fund, you have to have 25% of your management, board, and shareholders to be diverse, both gender as well as other forms of diversity. So I'll just say that slowly but surely, capital is also speaking and putting their money where their mouth is in terms of diversity and inclusion, and that can actually move the needle.
Very well said. Thank you, Anita. I mean, just fantastic initiatives you have highlighted, and that's the purpose of these conversations, when we can all get excited about even a few ideas. And I can promise you there are a couple in your comments which have really excited me, and I will reach out, and I'm sure there'll be others who will connect with you to find out more about some of the initiatives you have mentioned in your comments. Very grateful for putting them on the table. I'd now like to turn to Dr. Irene. You are a diplomat, and you have worked in the heart of the energy transition that we are seeing. We all know that access to clean energy has great potential to catalyze economic empowerment of women. Certainly, it is one area which is very close to my heart. We do a lot of work in that area. What I'd like to know from you is your views on how the ongoing transition can be just and how it can specifically help empower women at all levels. So I know that's a lot to pack in 3 minutes, but any insights from you, any models which we can emulate to learn would be very useful. Over to you, Irene.
Thank you very much. Well, first of all, thank you so much for inviting me to be in this very fascinating summit and speak on this very interesting panel. I'm already quite inspired by what I've heard. Let me start by underscoring the strong connection that I see between SDG 5 and SDG 7. Promoting equality between women and men and giving access to sustainable energy to everybody on the globe. Now, we know that the current situation, the COVID-19 crisis that we all experience, is threatening progress across all the SDGs, really. Major setbacks are already occurring as we speak. And SDG 5, I think the SDG on gender equality is particularly badly impacted because it is often the women and the girls who feel the compounded economic impact. Women and girls, as has been pointed out, who earn less than men for the same type of work, 16% up to 35% less in some countries. And women and girls that are also bearing the brunt of the unpaid care and domestic work. And that is true for all countries as well. Up to 3 times as much unpaid care and domestic work is done by women than by men. Now, obviously, that burden was heightened significantly through the lockdowns that we have all experienced, through home office, through homeschooling, etc. The digital divide, as has been pointed out already, is making it even worse for women. So while the corona crisis really threatens a lot of the gains that the SDGs have made in terms of implementation over the last several years, I believe that this crisis also offers an opportunity because we all realize that we have to build back, and we all realize that we need to build back better. So as we try to build back better, already it is necessary to include women more predominantly, more preeminently, really, in these efforts. A lot of the economic recovery programs that have been adopted across the world, in Europe and other places, they emphasize a lot also the energy transition and the climate change problematic. And that exactly gives us an entry point to making the transitions also more just socially and gender balance wise. After all, in order to accelerate the energy transition, we need to draw on all the available talent. It's not that we can afford to leave out the talent and the life experiences of half the world's population, because clearly energy transitions will require more than just switching from one fuel to another. They are deep societal transformations. And as such, they need to be able to draw on all available talent. And therefore, I think it is important to build gender considerations right into energy transition strategies. We have done some work in an organization that I'm the pro bono president, which is called the Global Women's Network for the Energy Transition. And we've looked very superficially at existing energy transition strategies. And we saw that barely ever is the gender dimension mentioned. So I think that is a big oversight, and it's not too late to correct it. Since time is of the essence, I would like to close these remarks by inviting you all to join the Vienna Energy Forum's call to action. It's about empowering women and youth to accelerate the energy transition, because youth, the people who will inherit the world in the next generations from us, they also are very often not at the table when we are discussing solutions. And when we talk about empowering women and youth to accelerate the energy transition, then let's keep in mind also that women and youth are not minorities, that they are not vulnerable groups, but they're actually strength and talent and future readiness. The call to action of the Vienna Energy Forum has several areas of action. The text can be found easily on the website of the Vienna Energy Forum. It goes from bridging the education gap to promoting responsible investment and procurement, to ensuring equal ownership of assets, etc., etc. So everybody can pick one or two measures and actually go and run with them. And hopefully when we come together for the Vienna Energy Forum later this year, hopefully in person, if not virtually, then we could report back on what has already been done. My last remark just on this issue of, oh, there are no good women to be found in infrastructure, oh, there are no good women that we could invite for this panel. The Global Women's Network for the Energy Transition has started to build up a database, which we call Women Experts in Energy. And that database, there are already more than 1,500 women registered from some 90 countries. So we can help any conference organizer, and gladly will do so, to find good panelists. And I think we can help in some other aspects as well. Thank you very much.
Fantastic, Irene. That was wonderful. I mean, how else can you have, can I be heard? Yes, perfect goal of a session like this is to, have information where we can all expand our networks, where we can contribute. So I hope the youth and the women are listening, because, clearly there is a lot we can learn and leverage from the good work you're doing. So thank you for that, and keep up the good work. Now, if I could come to Ms. Shibu David, who is the CHRO of South Asia for the GE Group. I guess what you do resonates a lot with me as well, being in the corporate sector. We hear a lot of talk around, initiatives for women, etc., etc. It always almost seems like a lot of wallpaper being put on walls, but what's behind? How strong are these initiatives? Are they really having an impact, And there's a lot of debate around it. So my question to you is that how can organizations foster an effective gender inclusive culture? And effective is key, because there's a lot of kind of talk, but it's not translating into women getting more and more engaged, pay parity and all of that. And I totally appreciate that we all have to take a step and back and pause and see where we've come. We've come a long way, and we must acknowledge that, but we have a long way to go as well. So what is it that we can do to make our boardrooms look more diverse, to make our workplace look diverse really, and to have parity? Over to you, Shibu.
Sure, thanks, Vaishali. And I'm probably going to stand on the shoulders of all my fellow panelists when I say what I do. What should we do to get more women in the boardroom? Short answer is lots. I guess, I'm going to start by saying that everybody wants to do the best. It's just that so much of it is initiatives that after a point it starts falling. And which is where I'm probably going to pick on what Dr. Agi said right at the beginning, that every organization has to have a very structured approach to how they're going to change things in their organization. And that's been one of my learnings. And clearly, when you work with GE, you do get a lot of this on a platter, where you do see that there's a lot of support and a lot of tailwind that you have when you want to do things. But one of the biggest lessons has been that rather than it being anecdotal and sporadic, how do you do it in a way where it is more scalable and sustainable? And how do you take people along, where it's not just women leading women and women being the role models for women, where it is that you're co-creating with a larger organization. So be it that the majority of the population may not be women, but they do want to make an impact. They may want to do it because they want to know how to do it differently for their daughters, for their sisters, for a better world, or because they genuinely believe that's the way it should be, whatever be the purpose. But how do you dip into that purpose and co-create? So one of our biggest learnings in GE has been, and it's not an initiative, but it's a lot of things coming together, which we call way of work, because we did not want it to be an initiative. We wanted it to be a culture change. And we looked at how do we have practices which are sustainable and inclusive practices. So examples of that could be, there are mythbusters that you say that women leave the workforce to raise children. We went back to the data and looked at why were women leaving? Were more women leaving in their first year after having children? The answer was yes. But why were they leaving? We went back and asked them, and they needed a support system where their people leaders could be a lot more inclusive. We went back to the people leaders and asked them, why would you let them go? And they really didn't know what is the kind of support which was needed. So we created something called Wow Moms, which basically was the woman as well as the family, right from the time when they are expecting to the time that they come back after their mat leave, and a year after that. What is the support system needed? It would mean tying up with your employee assistance program on, do you have more trained counselors to counsel not just the woman, but the family, the manager? In most cases, we saw the managers wanted to do well, they just didn't know how. So how do you create that in an organization in a way where you assume noble intent, but at the same time, you help them see what needs to get done? Or how do you use predictive attrition to do that? So practices which are sustainable is one pillar we worked on. The second one was on policies. We actually, we ran a survey on flexibility, and we asked men and women and, across the spectrum of gender, I should say, rather than saying men or women, we asked everybody, what is the kind of flexibility you would like to see? Do you like flexibility? Do you get flexibility? What holds you back? And what we realized was that it was not just women who wanted flexibility. Men wanted flexibility as much. And when we just kind of balanced that level playing field, then you just took away that piece where, somebody raised an eyebrow because a woman was leaving to pick up the child from the daycare, because men were equally okay, people were equally okay for men to leave to pick up the child from daycare or for whatever reason. So how do you create policies which, instead of enhancing that this is only for women and hence probably typecasting that raising a family is primarily a woman's job, how do you do it in a way where you balance it out? Like when we had parent-child rooms, the washrooms for both men and women, and we have gender-neutral washrooms also, all of them have diaper changing rooms, so that you just kind of make the point that, you know, it could be a dad, it could be a mom. Raising a child is there for everybody. And that's how you create the infrastructure to support what you're trying to say. And the final thing I would say, and you really cannot diminish the value of that, is the mindsets. You know, how do you change the mindset? It's not easy. Some of these dialogues are very, very difficult. But one thing we realized is the overarching theme, if it is inclusion, then we should be prepared to have conversations which may not be pleasant. We should be prepared to have the dissenting voice, because if you just make something a holy cow, a very sacred thing, like, you know, the standard dialogue you get is when you're trying to hire, you say, but G is a meritocracy. How do you balance meritocracy with ensuring diversity? And how do you engage in the dialogue which says it's not an either or, it's not mutually inclusive? You're saying diversity and meritocracy. So how do you have those inclusion dialogues became another big theme that we had. So these are the 4 pillars on which we as an organization have set up our diversity progress.
Thanks a lot, Shibu. And you know, we have 4 minutes to go, perhaps, you know, just a little bit less than that. So I'm going to take some audience questions, and then what we could do is, I don't think we'll have time for the second round of interaction I'd planned for. But first question is in connection with what Mukesh mentioned in his comments. How do we get, and it relates to that, and how do we get the legal system to play a bigger role in bridging the gender divide, given the prevalence of archaic laws that hinder women's economic participation? Also, it is not enough to just have laws. How can we make women, particularly those at the bottom of the pyramid, more aware of the rights they have and encourage them to be more confident and assertive if they feel that, you know, there is lack of justice as they go to work? So any comments? Mukesh, you, others?
Well, it's I know we have paucity of time here, but I think one thing I would say, any change comes from the top. And it has to be, you know, beside the legal or the corporate policy aspect of the change, if the leadership at the top sends a message, company, organization, countries follow. And a classic example I would say is look at the Biden administration, which is bringing a very diverse cabinet into the environment. We're seeing more women coming in, and that has sent a very strong message down to the rest of the cabinet secretary level and below, that you need to bring more diversity. So I would say it has to start from the top, the messaging and the action, and that will bring the change itself.
Fantastic. Well, that's a great example. And there's another question, and I'll probably hop over to the question, you know, just to make sure the audiences are engaged and feel that they're engaged. The second question is around global cooperation and knowledge sharing. How can that help in gender sensitizing around ground level administrators? For example, concepts like gender audits, analyzing gender impact of legislations, gender budgeting are in a very nascent stage in India, but perhaps we can learn from other countries with respect to how we can do better there. So any kind of quick 2-3 sort of key points which we could take away from these conversations around some of these you know, tools which are being used, for example, in the Nordic countries very effectively. And if you rewind and if we go back actually, you know, 20 years ago, they weren't very far from where we are here. So there's clearly scope for, you know, bringing about that change, and much faster given that we have the benefit of their experience. So very quickly, I think we have 30 seconds for an answer, and then we should wrap. So anybody wants to take this?
Irene wants to. I saw Irene.
Yeah, Irene. Yeah, Irene. Please go ahead.
I think there's a lot of scope for sharing of experiences because, as was pointed out by the former speaker, nobody wants to do bad things. Everybody wants to do good things, but often there is a lack of awareness of what is actually possible, a lack of awareness of what has actually been tried, tested and tried. So I think there's a lot of possibility to learn from each other. For example, in Austria, we have introduced gender budgeting. It was introduced through an initiative of the Director General in the Ministry of Finance. It's mandatory now. Nobody even thinks about it any longer. It's happening. Huh? So these things do change, but it's good to also communicate the change that has been introduced and to show how it is done.
Great. Thanks, Irene. And I think I just need to do a quick closing comments because we have few seconds left. Such a rich conversation with lots of new information for all of us to take away. Very grateful to Dr. Mathur and team, Karen from USAID, and the esteemed set of panelists who shared their views very candidly and lots to take away. As I said, thank you, everybody. It was a pleasure meeting you virtually, hopefully in person next time. Thank you. Enjoy the snow, Mukesh. And yeah, come here for some sun soon.
Bye-bye.
Good to see everybody. Take care. Bye-bye.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you to all our speakers. We now move on to a valedictory session. I hope you'll all join us there. It's about to start. Thank you.